All right, we are back after our first official break that Henry never thought that we had. Now I'm going to toss it to Mackenzie, who can introduce our special guest.
Hey guys, so I have a special guest, one of my line sisters, my friends from college, Miesha Miller, who is a who is a part of the WGA strike, the Hollywood strike. And my first question to you is just, what is it like on the ground? What is the energy like?
The energy is very, I would say, unifying. Like, I feel like to be able to go out there, this is a very historical moment. These are things that, I've been in the industry for like roughly what we graduated maybe like 7 years ago. So I've been in the industry like 5 years or so. And so these are like stories that we heard of like what they experienced like back in '08. And so it's really interesting to now be in this situation, even though I saw it coming. But I would say like the energy is high, people are serious. It's really fun actually to be able to go out there and like network with people who are doing like what it is that I love and like what I dream to do. Like people who I see in the rooms, like there are a lot of people who I see out there who are on my show. And so it's really like an uplifting, I feel like unifying energy, I would say, out there.
Can you talk about just like what led to this? I know we dived into like the energy, but what even started this and sparked this? Because I know you mentioned also in 2007, 2008, which I do want to mention. If you don't know, like if you go back and watch those like girlfriends and stuff that I kind of got back into during the pandemic, they abruptly ended. And I'm
Mhm.
assuming that's around the same time as the strike in 2007 to 2008. But if you can just talk about like how we even got here.
So essentially, from what I know, so the WGA and AMPTP, which is the studios union, and then WGA is the writers union, obviously. Our contract expired on May 1st. And so for a little over a month or so, they have been negotiating new terms for to renew a contract. And there were a lot of different things that the WGA was asking for that essentially, honestly, is fair. Like, I feel like streaming has became a thing, I guess, within the last decade. And it really kind of changed the entire landscape of television. And so there are a number of concerns and a number of things that the WGA proposed and brought to AMPTP. But it's to me, one of the biggest concerns is definitely like streaming residuals. So whereas traditionally like with broadcast and cable, there are residuals that writers receive for repeats. And so streaming, again, changing the landscape now, we used to have on demand with cable. Now it's, you stream everything. So it's literally everything is on demand. You can, if you miss the show's premiere or an episode premiere, whatever, you can go and stream it at your own leisure, at your own time. But writers aren't seeing the benefit of that. They're not getting residuals from that. So I think I had read in the trades like back in 2020 when COVID first happened, they had mentioned something about like Adam Sandler. There was a film, I can't think of the name of the film off the top of my head, but it was a film that was like one of the most watched, films on Netflix, right? And so, but Adam Sandler, he wasn't receiving like his residuals from that. So it's just things like that where traditionally they would, like if it was to air on, like I said, cable, they would be receiving residuals. So I know that's one of the biggest concerns. Also, and this is something that affects me as someone who is pre-WGA, I'm working in a writer's room. I've worked in writers' rooms as support staff, and I'm in the process of transitioning and working to transition. So I've been having meetings with agents, having meetings with managers, having generals with execs. But there used to be more episode orders from cable and network. And so now, like with streaming, it has also created a dynamic where you're not getting as many episodes. So like you might get series ordered, but it's only 8 episodes or 10 episodes. And it used to be more than that. And so what we're also seeing is like the rooms are much smaller too. So like one of the things that the WGA proposed was a minimum of 6 writers, 4 being writer producers. So that means you have at least 2 staff writers, which is like the entry level for writing. So the next step for me would be to be a staff writer. And that affects me because the rooms are smaller, there's less opportunities for writers like me to be staffed in a room because the studios have been getting over and being able to save more money by having smaller rooms. And the writers are feeling that. The writers are feeling, because it's a lot of work that you put in, not just a season, but an episode. And so like, that's something that directly impacts me. Another concern is like, when we're all hearing how artificial intelligence is developing. And so like, that's a concern. Like it's been a definite conversation like all throughout Twitter.
What's the conversation? Are they trying to say that AI can then write a script?
Right. Or that's the idea. And so like I know one of the things that the WGA proposed was to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. And that was something that AMPTP rejected, and they instead countered it by offering annual meetings to discuss advancements in technology, which is crazy. And so, and we already see it. Like we already see in some shows where, I personally have seen on Twitter with some shows, like you see like background cast and it's artificial intelligence. And
Wait, what do you mean?
That's what I was gonna say. Wait, you put me on to my mind is
I'm
going
getting scared. I'm getting scared.
Like fake people in the background. Like I wish
That's wow.
I will text you like this video that I saw on Twitter where it was like a legit show and somebody on Twitter called it out and like zoomed in and it was legitimately a fake actor. It was like a fake.
That's so
they don't want to pay actors to be on the set. True.
So like
this is a way to save money. And I'm not saying like we're not there completely, but that's definitely something that the WGA proposed because it's been a conversation about the use and the development of artificial intelligence and the use of that to essentially replace writers, which we know that's crazy.
Yeah. But I believe it though, because it's a real concern. I saw on the news the other day, this person said that anonymous, he submitted an essay using Chat GPT or whatever, and he got a 98%. If you transfer that to 6 pages, that could turn into a script, and then we got something else going on. So I do believe that a lot of our jobs should honestly be concerned for real.
Yeah, it's really scary. It's really scary, but honestly, like as a creative, and just it takes creativity. Like you have to think in depth. I don't know a lot about artificial intelligence. I don't know how extensive it is. But my thing is like, as someone who has literally been in a room and broken story, and as someone who has scripts of my own, like stories of my own that I have done like hours and hours of research to like be able to implement that and then go back and take information from an interview and tell it in a very creative, artistic way. I feel like that going in that direction will forever change the landscape of television in a negative way. And that's my opinion. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Like I said, as somebody who's pre-WGA, being out there at the protests, the different like strike locations, it's honestly like we're networking, we're talking to showrunners, we're talking to people who want to do like who are doing what it is that we want to do. I just met this amazing he's like a senior writer today, and like now I have had some generals with a very popular management company, and am waiting on them to get back to me after reading my script. And he's like, oh, I'm repped by them too. Like, send me your information. I'll, send them an endorsement, and I'm gonna introduce you to my rep as well. Like, there's a lot of that going on too. And that's something that, my colleagues, like staff writers on my show have, and just my mentors in general and people I know in the industry who are staff, like, have been telling me, like, yo, back in 2008, it was a great way to meet people. And a lot of people also like met partners, like their husband and wives out there. So it's a very interesting experience. But yeah, like, it's very necessary though. It's very necessary. And I feel like this is gonna impact my future as a writer. So
Do you feel like there's a discrepancy? I mean, obviously, in any walk of business or any walk of profession, there are less people who look like us, specifically less people who look like you specifically, or Mackenzie.
do I feel that way?
No, I was saying, is there a discrepancy? Because this is a union and there are a lot of voices that the union has to try to represent. And oftentimes that will come at the expense of Black and brown people, especially women. Do you feel like there is a different set of asks that you and other writers, whether Black and brown and women specifically, have that might differ from your white male counterparts? At the end of the day, a union is just a melting pot, and there are a lot of different people who would say, yeah, the white people are asking for this, but the Black people are asking for something totally different.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's any of that?
I think that majority of what we saw the WGA propose impacts everyone and benefits everyone. I will say, as a person of color who has been in some predominantly white rooms, I think that there's work to do on that end for sure. I think that, when I think it was 2020, when the George Floyd situation happened, there was like this huge push in Hollywood to, bring voices, like POC voices, specifically Black people, like to the forefront, and like uplift our content and uplift our storytelling and just uplift us in general. Sadly, that has declined significantly, and myself and my counterparts we all see that. So yeah, I would say that there's always been work to do in Hollywood in terms of inclusivity. I think that there are areas that we have seen improvements in, but I think we have a long way to go, especially for Black people. So, and I mean, and I say that because, it's like, okay, person of color, POC, that's like a hot button word, right? But I do feel like there are some demographics who assimilate and adapt a lot easier to white culture than Black people. Like, it's just, and so it's like, whoever can assimilate best, because you don't want the majority to feel uncomfortable because you're different. You know what I mean? And
yeah, I mean, and also, especially as a writer, your experience is different. Things in which you're directly writing to would probably hit with us, but somebody who just doesn't have that life experience wouldn't understand that.
Even the stories that I've told, like I have given my scripts, like I just hosted a table read on Sunday. It was my very first table read, like by Script Anatomy, and I was so proud of it. I literally cried. And while that was like, I think it was like draft version number 10. Like, I've been working on the script for a long time, and it's just a labor of love for me. It's a story that I hold near and dear to me, because it's the experience of not just myself, but my friends, my Black friends, my Black female friends. And so it's one that, like, no one can argue with me about this being our experience, right? And I have given this script to white people, and they just, some of them, not all of them, just don't get it. They don't get it. They don't get the slang. I've received notes before, which you always take notes with a grain of salt. But it's like, I've got notes where it's like, it's what's the word that I'm looking for? It's just our slang. It's the way that we talk, and the person didn't understand, and it's like it was a joke, and it just fell flat for her because she just didn't get it. And I feel like that right there is the importance of having diversity, not just on the writer side, but on all sides, like on the decision-making side, on the buyer side, on the distribution side, like on like actors, because you know, some of the dialogue, if I say something a certain way, I write something a certain way, I hear it in my head, like I need somebody who can relate to this to deliver it the way that I wrote it and I envisioned it in my head. And so I do think there's just like a lot more progress to be made. Unfortunately, there are a lot of predominantly white writers' rooms that it's just not a lot of us in, and it's hard. It's hard as shit to navigate. It's, excuse my language, but it's like I have literally held, because I'm working on a short film right now that is about, it's centered around like being a Black woman in a predominantly white workspace. And I have literally hosted like roundtables of women, and you would be shocked. It's like, damn, we really living the same life. That's crazy. We're at completely different companies, and yet we're having the same experiences. So I mean, you know, I can go on and on and on about this. I'm obviously very passionate about it because I experience it every day. And so I do feel like Hollywood as a whole has a lot of progress, not even just with the WGA, but just in general, to make. So
No, I definitely can.
Oh, go ahead.
I can definitely understand as a Black man in corporate America.
well,
Or
yeah, and that's a good point too, because it's not even just, it's, you can't even just say it's Hollywood, like it's tech, it's every career, like it's just, it's our experience, sadly. But I just feel like with Hollywood, I feel like it should be held to a higher standard. Well, maybe not a higher standard, but I do feel like there are some higher expectations just because like everyone appears to be so liberal and so like, you know, all about inclusivity, and you know, no one wants to get uh canceled these days. You know what I mean? So it's like, let's really be about it and display that with how we, you know, choose to staff a room, or like, you know, let's display that with how we hire people. Like, you're not about to tell me there's only like one or two Black women who you could find that were qualified to do the job. I know so many. So it's just interesting.
that's definitely fair. I guess like for me, I would definitely want our listeners to know, because I didn't know the many stages, and like you're a writer, right? What's the like process of selling a show, getting it picked up, potentially even having it on air? Like, what does that even look like?
Yeah. So it can look like a lot of different things. So I'm going to just speak from my experience because I have an agent and I've been in the process of like shopping around some projects that I've developed. So I could only speak to my experience, and I maybe will touch on some things that I've heard happen before. So essentially, you know, I develop a show. And again, there's different formats. So we're talking about writing specifically. It's like I could have a general with, you know, an exec at a studio and pitch to this exec my idea. Maybe, you know, I set up that meeting with him or her because of my relationship with her. Maybe my reps set it up. Reps meaning either my manager or my agents, they set that up, right? So I go in there and I have like some like materials to pitch to them, and they like it, they're interested. Okay, cool. If I have attachments, like talent attachments, if I have production companies who are on board, if I have a showrunner who is like someone who runs the entire ship, if I have those types of attachments, even better. Like, it's easier to sell. From the generals that I've had recently, I've learned that normally, because it used to be like you would go in with a pilot script for them to read, and you can still do that. But what I've learned recently, at least from the execs that I've spoken to, is that normally they don't. Normally, you're coming to them with like a pitch deck, and you know, they either like it, they don't, whatever, and then they buy into the idea. You already have a production company attached, great. You don't, okay, if they're interested, they want to enter into a development deal with you, they will attach one. Sometimes you can suggest, sometimes not. Sometimes they just, okay, we're going to pair you with this production company. They will pay you to like write the pilot. You know what I mean? And then from there on, it's like, do they want to green light it? Do they not? If they want to green light it, then they'll green light you to shoot the pilot. They'll fund you shooting the pilot. And so it's a whole, put together a whole crew. You have a crew, you have cast, and this is specifically for the pilot season. It's like, okay, everybody's shooting pilots, and then they're getting these pilots together, and they're like, okay, which one are we going to move forward with?
That's crazy.
That's scripted.
That's
Yeah, this is
crazy.
just what I've learned. So, but then there's also unscripted, which that is not really WGA.
Like reality.
That's reality, docu-follow, those type competition, those type of shows, which, my background before I started writing, like I got my foot in the door in television producing unscripted and like docu-follows and things like that.
To get picked up, unscripted versus
Huh?
scripted. Is unscripted easier to like get picked up versus unscripted?
It depends on who you are. It depends on who you know. It depends on who you have attached. It depends on your reps and how good they are and how connected they are. It's a lot. Like, honestly, there's no like one set route. There are a lot of people it's a lot of nepotism in the industry, which, I always say this about nepotism, and it's similar to politics. Everybody hates politics until it works in their favor. The same thing with nepotism. Everybody hates nepotism until it works in their favor. This is like 95% of business of who you know. Like, it's like your connections, your relationships. So things can happen, and sometimes not even in that order. But that's just like the general sense based on what I've experienced so far. Again, because I've produced and I started off producing in unscripted, I have an agent in unscripted, and I have several show like formats that I have developed and have been pitching around. That is, especially now, which is so sad. Like I do want to just like say for a second, like I personally, based on my experience pitching, I feel like a lot of creativity is restricted because these production companies and these networks love to play it safe. And when I say play it safe, I mean like they want collateral, and collateral meaning who's attached, who's the executive producer, who is the talent. And I get it from a business standpoint. If you're going to be investing like hundreds of thousands of dollars into stuff, you want to make sure that it does good. But I do feel like sometimes like there's really good content that's getting passed up, and it's like versus some content that's getting greenlit and making it to air, that is the only difference between the two is like who was attached. And I don't know, as a creative, it's very frustrating to deal with. But on that end of the thing, on that side of things, it's really just a matter of putting together the format, putting together a one sheet, putting together a deck. What I'm experiencing now, a lot of companies have been very interested in one of my projects specifically. And now what I'm experiencing is like we're getting attachment. So I've been having to like play that whole game and like get talent attached. And like I've been having meetings with like execs at record labels and things of that nature. It's a lot of politicking, but essentially what would happen with that unscripted show is, if they would either enter into a development deal with, which I actually had a network say that they wanted to do that. So I connected them with my reps and things of that nature, and then just never heard from them. That happens too. Was following up, my agent was following up. They literally just fell off the face of the earth. And, the rumor is maybe they didn't have the funds anymore or whatever, because that happens too. Like, and so sometimes things have to get cut, especially if it's like a high budget, like a high production, value production or whatever. So, but essentially they'll either enter into a development deal, or they will also give you the funds to go and shoot like a pilot or a sizzle. and they see the sizzle, they see, okay, do you want to move forward with it? Do not. Then you get a series order, you go shoot it, and hopefully it makes it to air. So yeah, there are a lot of steps, and it's also they too want to attach a production company. So
Are you hopeful about the future? Like, not the future of just the industry, but with the strike, like, are you hopeful that how long do you think this is realistically going to last? And do you think that you'll get, is there a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow?
That's
Like,
what I was going for too. What's the end goal?
So my guess is yes. Most people in the industry, the guess is yes, because you know, I've heard a lot of things. I've heard that, like, you know, there's a force majeure clause in a lot of like these overall deal contracts that people have. And so essentially it's like they're saving money because then they get to like cancel a lot of these contracts. That's something that I've heard. Obviously if you stockpiled content and now here you are, and there's a strike going on, so you kind of have some time like to give it, and you're actually saving money because you're not spending money on other things. You're not spending money on rooms and things of that nature.
Like,
So it's a lot of what'd you say?
The development. You're not spending money on development.
Right. And I mean, even layoffs. I mean, Disney, before this even happened, Disney was doing a bunch of, you know what I'm saying? So there's that. It's like very interesting, but I'm thinking that again, maybe their strategy was to hold off until they come to the negotiation deals with they have to come to the negotiation table with the DGA, which is the Directors Guild, and SAG-AFTRA, because SAG-AFTRA, which is the Actors Guild, because their contracts are also about to come to an end. I don't know. I don't see last time this happened back in 2008, the strike lasted for 100 days, I think. It was like 100 days. So I'm suspecting that we will all be back by September. I think some of my counterparts who are very optimistic are saying June. At the end of the day, no one really knows. But all things considered, especially the hit that like entertainment as a whole took when COVID happened, and there was like a complete stop down of production, back then in 2020, and just this overall desire or push for investors, like for these networks and things of that nature to generate more profit. I don't foresee this being something that goes on longer than like 3 or 4 months. That's just my opinion though. So
and let's be clear, I don't know who made it clear though. This is not just, these are like the powers that be that are just super above the people that we see on TV. Because I know a lot of people on Twitter were coming at Quinta, and I know we talked offline about it, but I do want it to be clear that it's so many other powers, like as you wrote, so many connections,
Quinta Brunson, God bless her heart. We love Quinta, and I love everything and admire everything that she's doing. She is not in control of this. Okay, this is between the two unions, WGA.
It's a labor dispute.
This is beyond those people who have overall deals and like creators of shows and things of that nature. Like, this is the people who cut the check and the people who represent us, like, as a union. So yeah. And also, to answer your other question that you asked, like, aside of how long I think this is going to go, I think on the other end, on the other side of it, I think that there is going to be a whirlwind of opportunity for people like me, especially who have been trying to get into rooms. And so for me, like, what I'm doing right now is just writing every day. It's sad because it's also fellowship season, and fellowship season is like one of those like very important things that as a entry level writer you take advantage of, because they kind of give you the validity or the green stamp in order for you to go to the next level, and for like showrunners and writers to like take you serious. And so I'm in a writers group and we were actually preparing for fellowship season, but it's something called scabbing, which is essentially you don't want to go against the WGA and take on work like writing for shows be like without the WGA's consent, like while this is happening, because they will blackball you. They will blacklist you. And like you don't want to do that. You don't want to be barred from being able to join the WGA because they are there to protect you. And so that's called scabbing, when you're like going and writing anyway and like taking on work anyway, while this is going on. And so what we have learned as a writers group is that it's also considered scabbing to apply for these fellowships, especially the fellowships with the studios. And so that's really interesting too. And I'm like, it sucks, but at the same time, I'm like, well, shit, that's just more time for me to like work on my writing. So I'm writing every day. I'm not having generals with network execs, but I'm meeting with writers, I'm meeting with showrunners, I'm talking to my mentors, and I'm just trying to take as much advantage of this time as possible. I'm also like spending a lot of time, like I'll be investing some of my personal funds soon into shooting my own stuff. Like I'm monetized on YouTube, so I plan on just posting my content on YouTube. And so I'm working with other, support staff, creatives, writers, actors, and things of that nature, where I'm like, okay, like I'm just put up my own money, invest my own money. Let's go shoot something ourselves and post on YouTube, use the profits from YouTube to be able to like shoot more stuff, because I also feel like because I was in that stage of transitioning from support staff to like trying to get staffed on a show. One of the things that I learned is like, while support staff is great, like at the end of the day, people don't like some, and I don't want to say sometimes people, it's hard for people to see you outside of just being an assistant or a writer's assistant until you show them what the hell you can do. And so I was already in that mind space anyway, like, okay, I'm over this shit. Like, I am ready to just create. Like that's what I do. Like that's what I want to do essentially, right? So it's like, all right, I'm no longer waiting for permission from people to do that. So that's what I'm on. And I feel like at the end of this, I'll have stronger samples, I'll have content that I've shot. I hopefully will have more relationships with more writers as I continue to go out there on the picket lines, and I'll be ready, waiting to get staffed. So, I think that's like the silver lining of it all. Though it is kind of scary because, like, you still have bills and stuff to pay too, but I'll be straight.
I
Well,
like
that's
your mindset, man.
No, you're gonna kill it. You have the right mindset. This just sucks. But I also hope that like this is the end, because I do feel like even though 2008 seems that long ago, it really wasn't that long ago. So I hope like 10 years after this, we're not still here talking about the same thing, because that's just ridiculous.
And who knows, with the way that technology is developing, who knows?
Yeah.
Well, we truly appreciate.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
No, please.
No, I was saying I'm pretty sure back in 2008, like not a lot of people was expecting like streaming.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Become the norm. Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm in it for the long run. I have like some things that I've set up, like some security things that I've set up. So, that's why it's important to it. So.
Well, from all of us and all of our listeners, we want to thank you for just sharing your story and your journey. I think that's going to be really informative for a lot of people. Real quick, where can people follow you or connect with your YouTube channel or all that good stuff?
For sure. So on all of my social media platforms, it's at Miesha Miller, and that's MIESHAMILLER_. And then my YouTube is just my name, Miesha Miller. So definitely like, share, subscribe, because y'all about to be seeing some content on there for sure. So
Well, we'll all look forward to that. And be sure to follow our content that includes Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at WRGO Pod. Be sure to like, listen, subscribe on all of our streaming platforms that include Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Amazon, if I can ever get my stuff together one day. And thank you all for listening.